So let's give this a go. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that the graphic novel adaptation of my book, Shadow of the Conqueror, is now live on Indiegogo. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. Some of the best art that I could find, great artist, Mike S. Miller, but also second edition version of my novel is released with leather-bound editions for both the graphic novel and the second edition novel. Guys, really cool. I think you'll love it. Check it out and also share it so we can really push it as far as we can. And if we hit certain milestones, who knows, maybe I'll try and do something fun with swords as a celebration. Greetings, I'm Shad, and if you saw one of my short videos recently, you might have known that I got sent a little package from United Cutlery sharing some of their battle-ready Honshu series swords. And I've already reviewed this one, which was the single-handed broadsword. It's the Honshu single-handed broadsword by United Cutlery. And this one is the historic claymore, Honshu historic claymore by United Cutlery, which we'll be reviewing in this video. But I have some follow-up items to just mention about the single-handed broadsword, because I have been surprised how much I've enjoyed this sword, and I've been using it a bit more, and I've learnt a little bit about it, but also it helped me realize why review sample items are actually really useful, because I didn't pay for these swords, they were sent for review. Now, it's not sponsored, and in case people are thinking it's a free sword, that is a sponsorship. The cost of these swords are vastly less than a proper sponsorship, and so I have no inclination or bias to try and please the people that sent it to me, to praise them unduly. And also because I haven't paid money for it, I'm actually willing to be far more abusive to these things, because when you buy it for yourself, you want to keep it, you want to use it, and so you don't want to break it. And because these were sent to me, I have been putting them through a decent amount of abuse. This one in particular, we're going to see what this claymore version is capable of. And what happened recently with this sword is that I broke it, indeed. The pommel snapped off. We even have the recording of it happening, and I was putting this sword through a tremendous amount of abuse, far more than you would really ever want to put a sword through. The swords aren't made to chop through, planks of wood. And I was really surprised at how well this sword did, honestly. So much so that I ended up liking it vastly more. So that's been one benefit of the fact that this was sent to me. I'm willing to test it to the point of breaking. The other thing is, it also means that I'm going to be testing and reviewing things that I never would have been interested in the first place. I would never have bought this sword because on just the statistics of it, I felt it would have been way too heavy for a single-handed sword. But when I got it in person, I was amazed at how well balanced it was, that this has actually become like a sword I really like that I never would have even considered buying, okay? But because they sent it to me, I gave it a go, and I end up liking it vastly more than I expected. Another advantage of the fact that, sample swords get sent to you. So I wanted to mention that, because this is the other thing. When this sword broke, you might be looking at it, but it's not broken, Chad. It looks perfectly intact. Well, the thing is, because I liked it so much, I went out of the way to fix it, okay, even after breaking it. Now, it also revealed, by doing abusive testing like this, pushing these swords kind of to their limit, it reveals any potential weak points. And if there's any weak point on this sword, turns out it is in the connection of the pommel to the tang. It took a lot of abuse to get that, and so I doubt it would ever snap off in just normal usage. But this one did. Again, I liked it so much I went out of my way to fix it. We literally welded on a new threaded bit of steel onto the end that I could then, I made a new nut and screw it on and fixed it completely. I've even done a new kind of wrap around the handle to get rid of one of the things I didn't like for the handle. And if you're wondering what this is, it's just duct tape. But it looks surprisingly leather-like as a basic electrical or duct tape wrap, and so I went out of my way to fix it. Now I have a sword I really like, but that's the single-handed sword, the Honshu single-handed broadsword from Windlass. So let's see if this claymore model, this is the Honshu claymore, will impress me as much. And I have a couple of other swords in the same size range that I'm going to just compare it against, and we're going to find out how good this claymore model is. This size of sword is actually one of my favorite sizes of sword. It's about as big as you can go. That's on the limit of wearability if you have a sword on your side. And if you go anything bigger than this, you are very much in the kind of Zweihander Montante greatsword size. This size of sword is on the middle between longsword and greatsword, and it could kind of be considered either a really long longsword or a bit of a short greatsword. And so there's a kind of subcategory just defined swords of this size, and it's war sword. And I love war swords, and so this one already is has my attention because of, I like the length of it. The lines on the crossguard are actually beautiful. I really like what they've done here. Now there's an interesting bit of sleight in hand, because what you want in terms of the fit of the blade into the crossguard, you want it really tight. But because they have this material covering here on this ricasso, so you see this blunt portion on the blade, this is called a ricasso. And then they have like an additional bit of cloth or leather wrapped around it for a secondary grip. It's characteristic of certain greatsword styles, so Zweihanders sometimes have this. You don't often see it on claymore design swords. And what's interesting about this sword, if we have a look at it overall, it's not the stereotypical claymore design. In fact, I have a sword that's very much more the stereotypical two-handed claymore, and that's this one right here. And so if we compare the difference, this is the design difference here. Now already, wow, I'm feeling a significant weight difference on my wrist on this one. I'm looking forward to trying that out. The thing is though, I really like it about this, but it also means the name it has might not necessarily be, claymore might not be the most accurate designation for the design of this sword. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, we have classifications so we get a good understanding of swords and stuff in the modern day. In history, they would have just called it sword, two-handed sword, or whatever. I'm not saying that claymores, historically, couldn't have had this design. In actual fact, I do like that they didn't restrict themselves to the stereotypical claymore that you so often see. Like, this is the stereotypical claymore, and I like that this one is kind of showing, look, obviously there were different types of claymores historically. They weren't always restricted to specifically this type of crossguard. See this crossguard, how it has kind of like a four-leaf clover design on the end, right? It's very stereotypical of the classic claymores, but again, not all of them were like that. But this is actually a bit closer to almost like a Zweihander or German style greatsword. It doesn't have the spikes or lugs that are further down the blade, but because of the flat portion here, the overall design, the pommel is an interesting one because we have kind of like a fishtail styled pommel. But as a result, I actually really like the design of this sword. I love this style of crossguard. See how it sweeps up on the sides and it has a central point? This is actually very similar to a design of sword that I made for one of my fictional D&D characters, specifically the edges. See how the edges kind of almost have a point, but they're not really pointed, they're flattened, but it curves in to have like spiked parts here, so if a blade comes down, it'll get caught in this section of the sword right here. Love that feature, love the central point there, and so overall, I love the design of the crossguard, and I love how clean and precise it is. These are very clean, precise lines. So far, I'm loving the design of the sword. If we get a good close-up on the finish of the blade, we have some pretty good lines. The central ridge of the sword is wandering a little bit. So you see this central ridge line? If we try and get really close down on that, you'll see that it wanders a little bit. It's not perfectly straight. Granted, it's hard to maintain a perfectly straight central ridge on such a long blade, but in terms of the lines of the fuller, they look to be pretty good. It wanders a little bit up here, but now we'll flip it over and have a look at the lines on the other side. And this central ridge line is much straighter. It doesn't wander nearly as much, and the fuller is pretty good as well. But look, you have to be looking very close to notice that. When you look at the sword on profile, you can't even see that, and it looks pretty clean overall. Look, I like the design of the pommel here. Just little flares. See how it has an indent on the flat sides of the pommel? Adds a little bit of, variety to just a straight kind of pommel like this. And I like that it has smaller, see, same with the lines here. Adds a little bit of, design flair. It's not much. It's tiny little features that make it just look that little bit nicer. Okay, so that's the design of the sword. This is 1065 high carbon steel. And by the look of it, so far the temper on it looks very, very good. Have a look at this. So you see this? The let's have the vibration nodes. We're looking about up here, actually way up here, the vibration node. Let's have a look at that. Oh gosh. So there we go. All right, but also, I'm going to be interested to see how this cuts as a result, because this is a very flexible blade. It's also thinner. Now, being thinner means it'll wobble a bit more, but it also means that it's lighter. And that's one of the things that I've noticed about this. This, for a sword this size, is shockingly light, which means I'm quite excited to see how usable it is when we start cutting things. Let's do the official weigh-in and see how much exactly this is. So, 2.2 kilos for a sword this size is actually pretty good. Let's compare it to another sword I have, which is the English two-hander. I believe it's by Windlass, okay? And just do a weight comparison. Now, first off, size and length comparison. These are very similar swords in terms of their size. This taper's stronger. It has a stronger profile taper with a more acute point, which means its cutting capacity would be a bit weaker towards the point, and the cutting capacity of this Honshu might be better, depending on the overall weight and distribution. And so let's put this way in. Well, they're very close. This is slightly lighter, 2.16 kilos, all right? And so this is a reproduction of a sword in the Wallace collection, I believe. And okay, really interesting. As I said, this is a reproduction, and the weight is very close to the historical one it's based off of. And so the Honshu claymore here is coming in at that beautiful weight. And for 2.2 kilos for a two-handed sword, not a problem. Not a problem at all, okay? This is not overly heavy, and it's certainly light enough to be very functional, because you can get two-handed swords which are much, much heavier. For instance, I already know this one is going to be heavier because just holding it is a pain. I'll just put this one in there. All right, so this claymore, let's reset the scales. 2.4 kilos. It's funny how, it's also weight distribution, because this one also, for only being 0.2 kilos heavier, it feels so much heavier as a result. But you could, especially when you hold it like this. So the Honshu one is actually lighter than this other claymore that I have. One of the issues that I find with a lot of swords I buy online is the factory edge that they come with. This was probably the biggest failing and criticism I had with the Honshu single-handed broadsword here. The factory edge was pretty rubbish, and we had some trouble cutting water bottles and tree branches and things as a result. I have since put a brand new edge on it, sharpened it all up, and it now is cutting like a beast. And so there's a lot of things that just really work well with this sword's proportions and weight distribution to just help it out in the cutting department to make it a beastly cutter, but I was let down by the factory edge. While I'm looking at the factory edge of this claymore, it feels sharp, right? But the issue is the edge angle. When I'm looking at this edge angle, yes, it feels decently sharp, not as sharp as the one that I did myself, but the edge angle looks to be far wider than I prefer, and what I find to work really well in swords that have good cutting capacity. So the swords I have that cut really well, more narrow edge angle. I have a feeling this is going to let us down, but we will find out. So we'll go super close in on the fit and finish, and you'll notice just some slight imperfections on just where the leather ends and where the pommel begins. You can see some of the epoxy, the stitching on the leather isn't, perfect. And these are the minor imperfections that, honestly, you will find with in the more affordable range. This would be more unacceptable on swords where you're paying, $1,000, $2,000 more. So in terms of talking about the small imperfections on swords and everything, one of the reasons why I'm not too bothered by them is because very few swords in history would be absolutely flawless, okay? There's going to be the budget range swords of medieval history, as we have kind of more affordable range swords here. And the thing is, though, the quality of our more affordable range swords in the modern day is orders of magnitude better than some of the best quality swords of the medieval period. So we kind of need to balance out our expectations. For instance, the steel quality is just modern steel, hands down, will always be better than historical steel. The temper and spring of this, right? it's just going to be way better. And this type of sword, if you were to take it in the medieval period, would be a wonder for the steel quality, and even minor imperfections like this wouldn't be massive like deal breakers in any means. In actual fact, I think we would be quite surprised as to how many small imperfections like this that we will find on what was considered the best and premium quality swords of the medieval period. Before we get to some of the beginning, cut tests with the water bottle, I do want to mention the scabbard. That this is a sheath. It's leather, hence that's why it's a sheath. If it was wood, it would be a scabbard. I know the words are interchangeable, but if we're being technical, this is, yes, a sheath. And look, it's fine, it's nothing phenomenal, but it's perfectly functional and slides in easy, just like so, slides out. So I like the fact that it comes with a usable sheath. Also, one quick update about the single-handed broadsword is much easier. Like so I said, remember how it was really hard to draw from the sheath? It was getting stuck in the review, and I said with continual use it'll probably fix itself. That's exactly what has happened. Now, drawing it from the sheath, easy as anything. Alrighty, I am really excited to try this out and see how well it cuts, because this is the thing, guys. It has a decent edge, factory edge. It's marketed as a more serious, functional sword, and so I'm really excited. But as also, bear in mind, user error may occur. We're going to find out, all right? I'm going to do some practice swings to get the feel of this thing, right? It has interesting kind of momentum in this, right? It's functional and usable, but, this is interesting. So I want to make sure I don't hit this. And I'm also interested to see how well it cuts lower on the blade and higher. I'm going to aim for higher up on the blade, kind of where the vibration node is. So almost right here. So let's give this a go. That is nice. That was a nice cut. I'm going to see if I can cut lower down. That was a worse cut. Is that edge alignment? Because there's a great example of a nice cut and a garbage cut. Look at how ragged this one is.
But when double checking the slow motion footage, it looks like my edge alignment is actually perfect right when the blade is about to make contact with the water bottle. It just seems like the blade wasn't sharp enough here to cut through the water bottle when there was less structure with it already being cut open.
Whew. It's a bit ragged at the top, but it corrected itself, ended quite nicely. I'm a bit thirsty. Oh, you didn't even feel that. That just went through like butter. Oh, all right. So, first impressions. This thing is cutting very nicely, even with the factory edge. These water bottles, look at how smooth that is. I'm gonna go flat. This is gonna be a flat one. These usually perform worse. There we go. Oh, I like that. Oh, so smooth. Love it. All right, so the Honshu Historic Claymore did really good with the water bottles. We're gonna take it to the Shadlands to do some abusive testing now. But before I want to do that, this is the same size as the sword that was made for this scabbard. And so I just want to see if this fits in. And let's double check this. Oh, so far so good. It's getting a little caught. Oh, this one's a bit harder to fit in. Doesn't look like this one fits. Ah, well, it was worth a try. All right, so we're going to be doing some abusive cut testing here. Now, there's an interesting misconception around sword cutting capacity, and that's the bigger swords always cut better. No, not necessarily. I've run into some interesting things when I've really put some longer swords to the test, because being a longer sword, the weight isn't as concentrated, it's distributed. And so when a large sword strikes down on something, okay, there's a lot of weight here that's trying to push down, and as a result, there is a tendency that they can bend easier than shorter swords where the weight is more concentrated. And as a result, shorter swords with more concentrated weight can end up cutting vastly better than longer swords. Now you might be thinking, well then why on earth would you have longer swords? Reach, okay? Reach is such a massive advantage in combat. If you can cut someone or kill someone at a longer distance than they can reach or, injure you, well, it's a game-winning advantage. But it comes with a balance. It comes with a bit of a loss in overall durability in heavy cuts against resistive targets. Now, this isn't as much of an issue when you're hitting soft targets like people, but if you hit hard targets like metal armor or something like that, well, you can run into issues. So I'm very interested to see how well this blade holds up against hard targets. And I also want to do a quick follow-up cut test with this sword. This is the Honshu single-handed broadsword. And remember, its cutting was pretty rubbish, but now that I've put a proper edge on it, I just want to see, out of my own interest, how well it does cutting up these these trees. They're like weeds. I think I called them tea tree ones. They might not be tea tree, but anyway, they're weeds, and I need to clear them anyway, so it'll be fun to chop them up. All right, so just based on, how this sword is, see how kind of wobbly it is, we're going to see some pretty wide deflections on these strikes, but we'll see how well this sword holds up. This is dried gum tree. Gum tree dries in a very hard state, and so it is not an easy wood to chop through by any means unless it's rotting, but this is sun-dried and baked. But anyway, let's have a go. Well, actually, that was a deeper cut than I was expecting. Let me do that again. So far, so good. I'm going to come in from this angle. Oh, so far, so good. So that was actually some pretty heavy strikes here. And what we see, there's no rolled edge. There's no discernible damage on the edge at the moment. I'm going to look down the blade. No bending. It looks to be holding up pretty well. Those are some pretty heavy cuts into solid wood, but we're not done yet. I reckon we might be able to get through this. I can feel that the sword taking a lot of vibration on these impacts, but it's holding together. It is holding together. So random cuts on the tree. I'm going to switch sides. So far, so good. This is such solid, hard wood. I'm actually surprised at how much is digging out of this. Here is some wood that's a bit more rotted, and so it'll be a lot softer, assumedly. I'll find out. Just want to see what this sword does against this. All right. I cut here and I broke it. So yeah, just a little bit rotted. Let me chop up here, see what this does. Look at that cut there. It's because soft rotted wood. Actually, now we're getting into harder wood. Yeah, we've hit much harder wood here. It's like almost hitting rock. It's so solid. But honestly, those are some really abusive strikes into some very, very solid wood. But after all that, I see no discernible damage at all, which is a testament. Actually, wait, oh no, that's just wood flakes. No rolled edge, no chips, no dinting, and no bending on the blade at all. We will test one thing though, which I think this is going to perform pretty poor in. That's thrusting. So honestly, I already know this is not going to be a good thrusting sword. It has a taper, and so if you're thrusting against an unarmed opponent, I have a feeling you could put something through them, but this sword is so flexible and floppy. If there's any main criticism I could give to this sword, it shows that it has a really good temper, so that's really good, but look at this, okay? This sword is way too floppy for a battle-ready sword. That helps out in the cutting, so it doesn't bend, it'll flex back, but in terms of thrusting, it's nowhere near stiff enough to but we'll try it out. I'll do some good thrusts, we'll see what happens, okay? Oh, actually, hang on. Oh, look at that. That had huge deflection. So if you are off center in your thrust, you get massive, look at that. This deflects and just curves out of so significantly. I'm not getting massive, let's see what penetration I'm getting. Look, this is mainly just getting through the bark, and when I hit the harder wood, that's where it's stopping. So, unarmored opponent, it would be deadly, of course, but trying to get that through mail, I'm very doubtful. So I think this is an honest, significant weakness in this blade. Just, it's not stiff enough. All right, so now we're going to test it against some green wood. This is just brush, needs to be cleared anyway. And so let's see how well this does. We're going to come down just on this branch here. Mostly broke it. It's not doing great, but what I really want to test it is something a bit against something thicker right here. This is, I'll chop through this one first. Oh, that wasn't bad, though it's not a clean cut. Okay, went through a decent amount and then started to fray. All right, so we're gonna chop this branch here, coming in on the side. Get out of here. Not bad, that one. Gonna come in on the side now. It's a good cut. That's pretty good. Very good. That's the performance we're looking for. So the factory edge isn't terrible. Look at some of these, look at how smooth some of these cuts are. Oh, you cannot get smoother than that. That is like polished. Lovely. I'm just going to clear some of these head branches. All right, this is the one. I'm really interested to see how deep it gets into this. Gosh. Oh, do we have a bend? No? No, it's surviving. It does not like it though. This is a much more solid bit of wood. Oh, look at that though. Look at that shave. Right there. So now that I've properly sharpened up the single-handed broadsword, I just want to see how well it does against this tea tree. It's like round 2 for it, but let's, I'm going to get this one up here first, just to do a preliminary little cut. Pretty smooth. Some of these upper branches here. It's not bad. This branch here. That's what we're talking about. Oh. 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 Oh, that's working nicely. 4 hits to get through something decently sized. That's similar to the spearheads we were working against. Yeah, this is solid, but it's shaving off nicely. This really doesn't want to be chopped down though. It is a solid bit of wood. Look at that. Oh, that felt good. That's a good cut. Alrighty, so yeah. Okay, it's doing a bit better now that it has a proper edge on it. Alrighty, so the Honshu claymore by United Cutlery held up very well against the abusive testing. Like, look at the, you know, the dirt that we have on the blade, but there's no bend in the blade that I can see. There might be the tiniest set, but that's almost expected from the abuse we put this through. Biggest issue, as we found, is how wobbly it is. And as a result, it's just not good for thrusting. I mean, look, you can thrust with it, but it's not great. You need something far stiffer. Chopping wise is really good. Weight distribution, I mean, this is a pretty nicely weighted sword. It's, of course, on the heavy range, it's two-handed, but it's perfectly in the functional range for two-handed swords. And in terms of just really testing out this kind of striking stuff where we're here, and we hit, you know, decently functional, So overall, I am quite impressed with it. It's not flawless, it has those issues, but if they don't bother you too much, I would recommend it. Lovely sword. This is the historical claymore, the Honshu historical claymore by United Cutlery. Not bad, not bad. Let me know what you think in the comments below. What do you think about the performance? Look, it's solid, held up to some good abuse. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. And of course, I hope to see you here on the next video on Shadowversity. So until that time, farewell.